Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 173 of the Childless Not by Choice podcast. My name is Civilla Morgan. My mission is to recognize and speak to the childless not by choice women and men around the world, reminding us that we can live joyful, relevant, fulfilled, childless not by choice lives. And whether you have children or not, thank you for tuning in. Today, we have a special guest. I can't wait to start speaking with her. She has so much good information for all of us that I think we're going to really enjoy this. I don't want to call it an interview, but this conversation. You guys know I prefer the word conversation. So today's show is about my conversation with mind-body revival coach, Mrs. Aisha Balesaria. And you know what? I didn't ask her if I was pronouncing her name correctly before I started recording. Oh my goodness. Anywho. It's early for me where I'm recording. It's in the afternoon for her, but we will carry on. I also, before we continue, want to thank my Patreon contributors, people who contribute monthly to the platform. Your contributions, as you know, help pay the salaries of my podcast producer and host, Zoom, where I interview most of my guests, and all the other things that come with podcasting. So thank you very much. If you are not yet a patron, visit patreon.com/childlessnotbychoice to set up your monthly contributions. And no matter your giving level, I have a gift for you. And of course, if you prefer giving via PayPal, you can find me at booksbycivillamorgan@gmail.com. Your contributions to the platform are greatly appreciated. Thank you, and let's carry on. So I was looking through Aisha's website, mindbodyrevivalcoach.com is her website. And of course, that information is going to be in the show notes. And you guys, you all know I'm always asking you to read and check out the show notes for every episode that we do. The show notes are really important, lots of important information. So anyway, as I was looking through Aisha's website, I found her bio. And so we're going to kind of go through the bio, but I like the newish thing that podcasters are doing now. Instead of just reading a bio word for word, we're kind of discussing it throughout the conversation. So I kind of like that, but I just want to make sure I highlight the fact that she is a coach. She started coaching because she wanted to support others to achieve what they really want, but weren't sure how to do it. So she started coaching around 6 years ago. She says that a coach at work really helped her gain clarity about her future when she was uncertain about how it would look. The uncertainty occurred when she was unexpectedly diagnosed with stage 4 endometriosis, a huge shock that affected her career and personal life. Let's stop there for a minute. I want to say hello to Aisha, and we'll go back to her bio if we need to, but I have questions. Ms. Aisha Balesaria, am I saying your last name correctly, first of all?
Yeah, so it's people do say Aisha, but it's pronounced Aisha. So
Aisha, okay.
So Aisha Balesaria. Yep, you got the surname perfect.
Okay, perfect. Wonderful. So welcome to the show. I'm so happy that you're here. Let's just jump right in. The first question I have for you is, can you tell us more about your passion for coaching and what revival means to you?
Oh, interesting question. My passion for coaching started because, like you just said, I had a coach at work who was really good, amazing actually. She was basically supporting me with my career stepping stones. And after my final IVF failed and it ended in miscarriage, that's when I decided, what do I really want to do with my life? Because I think when you go through IVF and, the goal is to become a parent, you have a different vision for what your future is going to hold. And then it was a lockdown, as you know, the coronavirus, the pandemic. And then I just thought, what do I really want to do? And in my previous job, I was already mentoring junior members of staff, and I really enjoyed it. And I really value connections with good people. So I trained as a coach, and I decided to become a coach supporting those who have endometriosis, fertility issues, miscarriage, baby loss, and those who don't have a child at the end of their fertility journey or who are childless by circumstance. And revival to me basically means, reviving what you already have, because we already have it in us. And I really believe in the mind-body connection, because I feel like if one isn't quite right, then the other one suffers. So it's kind of like reviving what we already have and just making the best out of the life that we have. And yeah, that's why I'm called Mind-Body Revival _coach.
Mm-hmm. And I like what you say about revival. We all know, typically what the word revival means, but to say that it's already there, it just needs to be revived. I really like that. It's an interesting way of looking at things. It's already in us, right?
Yep, that's right. So yeah, that's why I'm called Mind Body Revival Coach. And like I said, the mind and the body, when one doesn't feel right, then the other one suffers.
So, and we're going to discuss this a little bit because we just had another, just before we started recording, we just had another mini conversation, which was kind of a highlight. I never thought about it, but since I already have this particular question created, I'll ask it anyway, and then we can go into that. In the world of, we kind of belong to the world of childless not by choice because we wanted to have children, but we couldn't, we didn't. I always feel like those of us who wanted but could not have children are basically on the same or similar-ish journey, caused typically by different illnesses that take us on that journey together. So for me, it was fibroids in time. I ran out of time. I didn't meet Mr. Right in time. And I had fibroids. And on your website, you say that for you, it was endometriosis and adenomyosis. I know some people pronounce it adenomyosis. Can you tell us your story as much as you would like to share about your journey to childlessness?
The thing is, I'd been experiencing excruciating pain from when I was around 14 years old. And I remember missing a lot of days of school. During my period, I was just in agony, bedbound. And my mum, she was really good. She kept taking me to the doctors and they kept saying there was nothing wrong with me. And it was only until my late 20s, when I couldn't fall pregnant, I was finally believed by doctors. You know, it was like they almost valued my reproductive health above my physical and mental health. And I basically asked to be referred to this hospital that specialized in fertility because I wanted a place that specialized in, something that affected me. And my cousin's the one that told me to self-refer because she already had endometriosis and she suspected that that's what I could have. And then when I went into the consultation room, the consultant literally looked at my notes and said, I think you might have endometriosis. And there was a cancellation. And he said, oh, let's put you in for a diagnostic laparoscopy. I didn't know how to feel at that point because I was like, wow, this is going really quickly. And then I had the laparoscopy. And when I woke up, they told me I had stage 4 endometriosis. My ovaries were kissing. My bowel was adherent to my uterus. And that explained the excruciating pain I'd been dealing with for 15 years. And when I woke up, all I remember doing was crying because I didn't know how this would affect my future, my fertility. And at that point, I'd only known a small bit about endometriosis because of my cousin, but there wasn't much knowledge out there. And the internet wasn't like how it is now back then. So the information I got was solely based on what the medical staff were telling me. But it was a really difficult time because I was like, wow, all these doctors dismissed me for all this amount of time. And when I was suffering, some days it was agony. And after my degree, I went and did a postgraduate degree. So I did a master's degree. And I remember I found it really difficult to sit my exams because the pain was unbearable. And, it's really hard to describe how bad the pain was. And I remember sitting in the GP doctor's surgery crying and he didn't know what to do. He just looked at me there was no empathy. I don't know if he knew what to say to me. He kind of handed me a tissue. And I was there really uncomfortable. And I was like, well, are you going to do anything? Are you going to say anything? Is there anything that you can help me with? And it's just like, well, you're here. You're describing something. We don't know what it is. But I just remember in them 15 years going back and forth to the various doctors and not one of them did a thing to help me.
Wow. Not a thing.
No. And at one point, and I don't know why I giggle when I say this, at one point they sent me to a psychologist because they said that the pain was in my head.
Oh.
I know it's actually unbelievable. I think I laugh because it's so ridiculous.
I just don't understand how this is still where we are. But honestly, after recent events, I guess I keep telling myself that just generally speaking, it may be the 21st century, but we're still the same humans that I don't know. I'm giggling too. We're just not evolving like I think we should be. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. I think when someone's explaining that their everyday activities are stopping because they're in that much pain, and not one GP doctor is listening, that tells you something. It's almost like women are either just not believed or they think that we should put up with pain. I don't know. I really don't know. But when I look back, I've let go of the anger, but I'm still annoyed about it.
It would be annoying. And I think it's global that we are typically not believed, that we're told it's all in our head. I've had family members that have said things like that to me, not just about this, but just generally speaking. Oh, it's all in your head. You know,
Yeah, it's awful.
the gaslighting is unbelievable.
And then you
So,
convince yourself. I convinced myself that, you know what? Because afterwards, when I was working, I experienced really bad back pain, pelvic pain. Sometimes I don't know how I did a full-time job back then. You know, I did a full-time job. You run a household. You know, so many things I was doing, and I look back, and there's just no way, you know, I could do that now without support and help and, you know, factoring and relaxation and downtime in between. And I think there was, you know, all them years ago, there was this kind of pressure to be busy all the time because, you know, how productive you were. And I think back then I was just constantly busy. And when I look back, I just think, how on earth did I do it being in that amount of pain? And a lot of the time, like even my family would be like, oh, you know, you've got a low pain threshold. But now when I look back, it's actually the opposite. I had a high pain threshold because my ovaries were stuck together and I was experiencing all that pain and I still was, you know, functioning and getting on and doing everything like general, I don't like to say normal, but you know what I mean? Like general people, healthy people could do. I was doing all of that with this condition.
probably because you kind of had no choice or felt like you had no choice,
That's
right?
right. Yep, that's it.
I know the feeling.
Yeah.
So before we get to that, because this is what we were talking about in the pre-chat, that you don't really like to talk about or consider yourself childless not by choice. There's been an evolution in your life where, well, we'll talk about in a second. But I also wanted to mention that I love the cheat sheet questions that you have on the website. Everyone who's listening, check out the website, please. Like I said, the link is going to be in the show notes, but definitely check out the cheat sheet because I'm a big proponent of that, where you have a list of questions when you go to your doctor and not just go expecting the doctor to handle everything and to know all the answers. Because like you said earlier, he just sat there and said nothing. And I always find it interesting. I've come to the conclusion that when doctors are going through school, they don't take an empathy class, or maybe if it's available, it's an elective and not required. Because I've run into the same type. They just sit there and look at you after you just said, I just lost my dad 6 months ago, a year ago. They say nothing. They don't give condolences. It's just, I just don't understand it. And you're literally crying. They say nothing.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
No,
I've experienced that too. So anyway, we talked a little bit just before we started recording, and you were talking about that you don't like labels. So tell us more about that. The fact that you don't like the label of being childless not by choice.
It's not, the thing is, it's not that I don't like it. I just don't like labels, full stop. And I feel like, you know, I wrote a blog not last year, the year before, maybe it was the year before that. And in it, I was talking about that I'd always been, you know, brought up with a label. My father's Gujarati Indian. My mum is a white English lady. And back then, you know, mixed relationships, especially in the South Asian community, is very frowned upon. So I was always othered when I was younger because I don't look like, my sister and I don't look like my cousins on either side because we are mixed race. And also my mum was a Christian and she became Muslim. And then my dad's family are Muslim. It's like we always just felt different. And then growing up, I had this chronic illness that I knew nothing about, endometriosis. So I always felt like I was very unhealthy compared to all my, you know, healthy friends. So then you've got another label, you know, when I happened to find out I had endometriosis, then you've got this other label that, you know, you've got a chronic illness. And then afterwards, you know, you go through this, well, I went through the fertility process where I found out that endometriosis and adenomyosis, which we'll talk about later, affected my fertility. Then I was in another bracket of being othered. And then it's like I had fertility treatment and it seems like me from all my peers going through fertility, I'm the only one without a child. It's like all these labels. And I always seem to be like in the worst odds of things. So it's like all these labels, I get tired of labels because, you know, I'm always labeled in the other category. And sometimes it would be nice to be in the majority. So I was explaining to you at the beginning, you know, before we started the pod, you know, at first I was identifying as child-free after infertility, and then that kind of didn't fit right with me. And then as we went on, it was like reclaiming the childless narrative and then fleeting between the child-free and childless. Because sometimes, you know, some days I feel a lot more child-free than childless. Some days it's like I don't think about it at all. And now it's almost like I don't feel like I'm childless because I'm in a place where I'm really happy with the life I have. That doesn't mean to say I'll always be unhappy about my children that aren't here. So I miscarried 4 times for those of you that don't know. So I'll always be sad about that aspect of, my life. But it's like there's no part of me right now that would want a child because I'm in a very different place and headspace to where I was in my 30s. So yeah, that's what I was saying to you. Labels. Do I identify as childless? Not really. It's more about my life after infertility now and how I can support people who wanted to have children but can't.
Mm-hmm.
And I think sometimes as well, it's also hard explaining to people, especially those who are parents, what I just explained about. There's a timeline for me where I really wanted kids. And it's like now there's different things I want for my life. And it's almost like when you explain this to people, they feel like you couldn't have had a child, you couldn't have wanted a child enough if that's how you're feeling now. But it's like, no, because there's a time and a place for everything, I believe. And right now, isn't it?
I agree totally. I mean, at my age, because I believe I'm several years older than you are, I will not be telling my age on the podcast, but oh my gosh, I would have given an arm and a leg in my 30s for a baby. I would have done anything for a baby.
Yeah.
And now, and this is what this is why I want to make sure that the listeners, because I know a lot of my listeners are much younger, they're in their 20s and 30s and just finding out that they're not going to be able to have the children. And so I want them to understand that I totally understand that place and that space because I was there crying myself to sleep every night, trying to meet Mr. Right. I met somebody and we dated for a couple of years and I thought he was the one. And then he told me he wasn't ready. So I dropped him. I talked about that in an earlier episode and didn't really meet anybody after that. Family members would tell me that I was being picky, but picky about what? There's nothing to pick from. So it's like, picky about what? There was nobody there. And so I would be told that I'm living in the wrong place, the wrong area, and I just wasn't meeting anybody. Anyway, it didn't happen. Yeah. And now I'm in a place where I got to experience children through my nephews who are now grown men. I got to babysit. I got to keep them for the weekend. I got to take them to the museums. I got to play, the role of an aunt. And I'm so thankful. I always say to my brother and my sister-in-law for allowing that to happen. And now I have a great nephew who's going to be 5 in August. Aww. So yeah, I mean, that's a beautiful age. And I'm enjoying my time whenever I have my few minutes with him. So I'm in a different space. I could not have a child or care for a child now. There's no way. That doesn't mean I never wanted a child. I begged God above for a child. It was really bad.
No, I hear you. And I think that's the thing. I think sometimes when I meet people and they're childless by circumstance, which could be either because of health reasons, because they never met a partner, and then when they did, eventually their fertile years, had kind of diminished, depleted. And then they say things to me like, oh, but your story's worse than mine. And I'm like, hang on. No, it isn't. Why? Because I went through IVF and you didn't. It's like, no, your story is even more validating because people sometimes don't even recognize that story. And I think it's so painful when something kind of like isn't tangible and then people don't recognize it at all because it doesn't even cross their mind.
Yeah.
Because you can talk about IVF and you can talk about the processes of IVF and, it's very well known, and IVF not working out and failing, it is devastating. But there are other scenarios that are equally devastating. And I think it's really hard when it's like trying to get pregnant every month and you can't get pregnant. Like that's hardly recognized at all. That was as painful for me as having IVF, to be honest.
Right. Because it's not tangible. It's not seen.
Yeah, that's right. People they're just like, oh, try again. It's like, well, every single month you're doing ovulation tests, it becomes very clinical. It's really depressing. And, a lot of the time you don't even feel like talking about it because people will look at you and be like, why is that something to like cry about, moan about? And it's because people have that privilege where they can try and they get pregnant in the first, second, third, fourth month.
Right. The fertility of some women is just, it's like unbelievable when you see how many children they have and how quickly and they can have a child, but no one's seeing the other side of it where yeah, like you said, the whole act becomes clinical and every month is a disappointment and all
Yeah.
the things that come with that.
Mm.
So, yeah, I'm hoping that this is an eye opener. I wish certain people would listen to this podcast because it
Yeah.
would just be an eye opener for them. But anyway, you mentioned that you grew up in a multicultural home. How does that speak to your intersectional perspective, if it does? Tell us more about that.
So I think that's why, like in my coaching practice, I always say to everyone, look, this is a very safe space for you to be yourself. Because I know what it feels like, growing up being different, othered. So, it's really important to me that people can come in and be, I don't really like the word authentic self because I don't even know what that means, but be unapologetic about who they are.
Right. I think unapologetic is a little bit better than authentic.
Yeah, because that word was like a buzzword quite a few years ago,
Oh, yeah.
authentic self. And I'm like, what does that even mean? Like, what are you, when you're not being your authentic self, are you being fake? Like, what does that even mean? So yeah, just unapologetic. And I think, this kind of diversity of culture, religions, fusion, and I don't want to sound cliche, like made me who I am. It's really broadened my horizons basically to other people and the way I've dealt with things myself, the way I've dealt with like fertility, the way I deal with other people. And growing up, it might not have seemed so nice being different, but actually, like when I look at it today, it's actually really benefited me.
Mm-hmm. So did you have relationships with your other cousins? It sounds like you did with at least one of them, but growing up with your family on both sides, did you have, I'm not trying to be nosy, but I guess,
No, be nosy. It's the time.
I guess because that word intersectional or intersectionality always, it intrigues me. And I guess it would be something that and I never thought about it. I guess on this level, I guess there's intersectionality for me as a woman, a Black woman, a Black woman in America, a Black woman who is of Caribbean descent, for instance. I wasn't born in America. So all of these things are coming together to make me who I am, if that makes sense.
Yeah, exactly. No, it makes perfect sense. No, I did. I had a really good relationship with my cousins on both sides. What it is culturally, I think we were brought up more Gujarati. So I do identify as like mixed South Asian or South Asian. And I think the religion played a big part because I'm Muslim, for those of you that don't know. We had a lot of interaction with my mom's family, who were Church of England, Anglican, and my mom's sister. She used to love Easter and Christmas, and we always had her over, and we always had dinner for her and presents for her, and she loved Christmas. And she used to decorate her house with all these lights. And honestly, you go into her house, and I used to look forward to it every year because it was just perfect. She had so many like decorations in their Christmas tree, and we used to love having her over. Like we used to look forward to having her over. And actually, my aunt was childless by circumstance, which is, she passed away in 2019 and my sister and I adored her. She was like a second mom to us. We loved her so much. And yeah, it was just lovely having her over. And she was childless by circumstance because she was 10 years older than my mum. And back then, she, like there were very traditional roles for men and women.
Right.
And my aunt was practically a G, and she was like, "No, I'm not going to settle, and I'm not going to put up with a man telling me what to do." So yeah, she chose to stay single, but she always said she would have loved to have kids. And had like donor conception been a thing then, she always said like later on that she would have had a child by donor.
Yeah, I did consider IVF as a single woman. It was a thought. My condolences on your loss, and I know how it is to have an aunt that you really love, And I love Christmas too, by the way.
But that's why I love this season. I love this season because it reminds me of her. And she loved green. And every Christmas, my sister and I tried to wear green because she loved green. But she was just so way ahead of her time. Like the way she used to think, honestly, she was just so ahead of her time. And she was such a big influence to my sister and I. And we're a lot more like her in personality than I'd say our mum. And she really had a big impact in our life. And we miss her so much.
I can imagine. So speaking of being Muslim, we also talked about, am I going to pronounce it right? Eid. I did a little bit more research. And as we also talked about, I'm Christian. So I found that maybe there's more than two Eids, you can tell me, but I found two. And one of them is the one I think that you're just coming off of, Eid al-Fitr. Is that how you say it?
Yeah,
okay.
Eid al-Fitr.
Fitra, okay. And then I saw that there was an Eid al-Adha.
Yeah, that's right.
And I was like, okay, so that's the one where Abraham was willing to sacrifice his son. I'm like, I know that story.
Mm,
You
mm,
know, as a Christian, we learn all of those stories from the
mm.
Old Testament and the New
Yep.
Testament, we call it.
Hmm.
So tell us a little bit more about Eid al-Fitr, since you're just,
Okay.
that's just finishing, right?
Yeah, so we just finished it a few days ago, and it's basically a celebration after Ramadan. In Ramadan, it's like basically a month of fasting from sunrise to sunset. It's a month of spiritual purification, reflection, and devotion. And it's just a way to cultivate empathy for those who, have no food at all. I mean, we can't even imagine, what people go through. And this is just a little bit of what they experience. And that's why we do what we do in Ramadan. And we basically increase our daily worship, and we're encouraged to pray the Quran, which is our holy book, and stand in like the long night prayers. Just a way of reflection, devotion to God, increases your faith. We're encouraged to also give charity, a lot of charity in this month to help those who are, less fortunate than us. And it lasts for like 30 days. So during this time, there's a lot of letting go of things, refraining from things, kind of like bad speech, like talking about other people. I mean, these are things we shouldn't be doing anyway. But
Right.
but it's like that's how we should intentionally live our lives. But this is almost like a yearly refresher where we're a lot more conscious of these things. So it's not just about the fasting and the praying. It's also about how you're talking to people, refraining from gossiping, backbiting, because a lot of the time, people, like the scholars say, there's no point in fasting if you're going to talk about someone. It's like eating the flesh of your dead brother.
Oh,
So yeah, so we're all very conscious about, these things in Ramadan, and the hope is to reflect on this after and carry on.
that is interesting. Okay. Thanks for sharing that part of your life with us as well, because I really did want to cover that. That is going to remind me, not that I go around talking about people, but
Yeah.
knowing that if you do, it's like eating the flesh of your dead brother. That is, whew, that's deep.
Yeah, it is quite deep. Yeah, it is quite deep. So Ramadan is like a big reminder to us as Muslims how to lead our daily life. And the funny thing is about Ramadan, there is a lot to do in Ramadan. I mean, fasting from sunrise to sunset isn't that easy, especially if you've got health conditions. But but there are certain people who are exempt from fasting, those who are unhealthy, those who are pregnant, breastfeeding, etc. And then you give something called fidya, which is to make up for not fasting. You give money to the poor instead.
Mm.
So yeah, so it's a nice time of reflection. And actually previously when I've had fertility treatments and stuff, Ramadan's always come at a time where I've needed it the most. It's mad, but it's like really come at a time that's helped me. But I've been feeling my worst during these times. And then Ramadan comes and I'm like, yep, this is, God sent this to me because I really needed it. So it's really helped.
Well, yeah, I think in the Christian religion, we fast as well. And I think I remember, I remember a coworker telling me one time years ago, she said, because you don't tell people you're fasting, you just do
Yeah.
it. You know, it's not
Mhm.
something you don't go around spreading the word, I'm
Yeah.
fasting. You just kind of do it and you pray and you do all the things that come with fasting. But I had a coworker tell me one year, I can always tell when you're fasting. I'm like, excuse me? She said, yeah, you're totally calm. The customers might be yelling at you and carrying on, and you're totally just calm. I was
Yeah.
like, wow, you never know that people are watching you and studying you, and just, it was really weird that she was right. I was fasting at that time when she told me that,
Wow.
but I had no idea that, I was being watched like that. So
Wow.
that's a thing. We are always being
We
watched.
are.
And so kind of pivoting again,
Mhm.
your book, 1 in 8. As we wind down here, tell us a little bit about the book 1 in 8.
So basically, there was this really lovely lady who contacted me, and just after lockdown, she contacted 17 other people, 18 including myself. Or sorry, it was 18 including her and 16 other people. And she asked us to write something about our fertility journey. So she had like really 18 diverse stories about people going through fertility and their outcomes. And my one was obviously, at that point, I was writing about being child-free after infertility. And she just wanted to hear my story because she was basically saying that, normally you always hear people end up with their miracle baby. So it's kind of like when I first started out, sharing my story, supporting people through coaching and writing. Yeah, it was just really nice that she asked me amongst other people. And it's funny because during that time, a lot of people have had their babies. And then there was a few people going through IVF. And it turns out I'm the only one in that 18 who has walked away without a baby.
Of the whole 18?
Yeah, of the whole 18.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
I'm glad I was in that book, because then someone reading that, will actually see all these stories and be like, oh my God, that's not going to happen for me, or that might not happen for me. And then there's me, and I think it's so crucial to have that story, because actually, you know what, it is okay to be sad about the fact that, you're not a parent and it didn't happen, but also there are other things waiting there for you. And that's what I was saying to you before we did the podcast. Like, a lot of the time when I do podcasts, the focus is on what we didn't have, but I actually do have a really happy, enjoyable life without children. The one thing I always say to people, even when I'm, talking about being childless or child-free or life after infertility, is that a lot of the time we do have to be intentional about our happiness, because so many people will tell us that you cannot have a happy life without kids. So even if you're fine, it'll be someone's comment or like a remark someone will make, or you'll see something in the media, but you have to be really intentional about being happy, because of all the messages you're going to get about being a parent, being a mum, prenatalism. There are so many of us out here without kids and without partners. I mean, I'm married, but some of my happiest years were when I was single. Things don't make you happy. You have to be happy.
I really love this. I love this. Go ahead. I'm sorry. I really love what you're saying, because I really want, oh my gosh, I know somebody listening is going to really grab onto that, because I think I say it all the time, but maybe not quite this way. But it's true. We have to be intentional, because life is short.
It is. We're not promised tomorrow, seriously. And it's like, it's okay to have moments of sadness about things that didn't happen. I'm not even talking about just not having kids, other things. But you know what? It's like, to me, I can't speak for other people, and I wouldn't tell people how to live their lives. But for me, like you said, life is short. And the short time I have here, I want to be able to do whatever I want to do within my reason, within my control, within my means. And I want to be able to live the happiest life that I can live. And that's not to say that every day I want to wake up and nothing can go wrong. No, this is life. Things happen.
Right.
You've got to pick your heart sometimes. But the things I can control, like going on holiday, traveling, these are the things I love doing as a person without any children. I think it's a lot easier without children. I mean, someone who's got a kid may contradict me, but that's just my personal opinion. I mean, it's really nice because I can up sticks and go whenever I like. I don't have to go in the holiday periods when it's so expensive. And it's one of the times where I love not having children, is when I'm away. I can't even tell you how much I love just being away and it being me, my family, my husband. I enjoy it so much. And I just sit there thinking, the restrictions I would have if I had a child when I'm traveling. So there are times when I love being child-free.
Again. And I totally agree. I agree with that. But, some people listening might say, she's just jealous. They're just jealous. But we're not. We've decided to live the life that we've been given, which is what I always say. We can still have a joyful, relevant life, but we need to live the life we've been given. And this is the life we've been given. This is what we got.
And you know what, about the jealousy thing, I can honestly sit here and say, I've never looked at anyone else's things and wanted it for myself. As in, I wanted my kids with my husband, but I've never looked at someone else's child and thought, I want that child.
No.
Or I've never looked at someone else's car and thought, I want that car. If there's something I want, it's because I want it for me.
Right.
Do you know what I mean? So the jealousy thing is it's just like a throwaway kind of comment, isn't it? At the end of the day, there are aspects of parenting that I'm sure people would look at and look at my life and think I would never want that. And that's fine too.
It's projection. I feel like it's projection when people say, call childless not by choice women jealous, because you're right. Envy is not something I have to deal with. I've never had to deal with envy. If it wasn't, I wanted what, like you said, what was for me. I don't want somebody else's thing. I don't want somebody else's husband. I don't want their children. I don't want like you said, their car. I want what's for me.
Yeah, that's it. And that's another reason why, like, when I talk to people in the Childless Not by Choice community, sometimes, people say they find it very hard to be around children. And for a time, you know what, that's okay, because, when you come to a realization that you're not going to have children, it is very difficult. Like, one's saying it's easy. It's very hard. Like we were saying, it was very painful for both of us. Different circumstance. Pain is the same. Pain is pain at the end of the day. How you got there may be a different story, but pain is pain. But literally, both my husband and I have huge families, and like 95% of our families have children. So if I cut myself off from this, they'd be missing out and I'd be missing out.
Right.
So sometimes it's about being open about your feelings with people. Sometimes people don't listen. But at the same time, like, it's about having people in your life who value you and you value them, regardless of whether they have children, they don't have children, you know, because sometimes I feel like you're cutting yourself off if you're just not going to be around people that have kids. You're going to be surrounded by it all the time. Like, there's never going to be a time until you die where you're not going to be around pregnancy announcements, people that have children. And a lot of the time it's a way of managing it, not avoiding.
Yeah. And I hear what you're saying, but I just recall how I felt in my 30s more, not so much my 20s, but 30s. I'd say that decade, it was really hard to be around all the announcements and the baby showers and all the things. It was hard.
No, but it's hard. But I think there comes to a point, and that's what I'm saying, in the grieving stage or the realization, there is a point where you have to not isolate, but do your own thing, because you're trying to deal with it and it's too painful. And when things are too painful, sometimes you need to be away from these things. But it's like having that as something permanent. I mean, for me personally, just wouldn't have benefited me.
I agree in that if you, at some point you come to terms. So now at my age, yes, I can go to a shower. Would I go? If it's a family member, yes. I wouldn't put myself out there to just keep attending showers all over the place. Yeah. But if it's a family member, and when I go, I'm happy for that person. And I pray for their pregnancy and I pray that they have a healthy baby. There's no sadness anymore, like you said, because I've evolved past that. But I do remember, and I look at the younger women and men, you know, who are now in their 20s and 30s and trying to come to terms. And I hear them in my Facebook group about how they're feeling, how sad they are, how depressed they are. And so now I'm reaching back, like you are, I'm sure, to encourage them that life is so much more. You get so much more. I'm getting ready to, as of this recording, go to the beach with friends. I just said, you know what? I have Friday off. Let's go to the beach. It's been a while. Yeah. And when you have children, you can't really do that. As much of a planner as I am, even if you had children, you still have to do even more planning. But now I'm at the point where, let's just go to the beach. So I think what we're both saying is that, especially to those who are younger and just finding out they're not going to have the child, you will evolve into being able to handle it and live your relevant life and not, like you said, cut off portions of your life because of your sadness. Is that kind of what you're saying?
Yeah, I think there's in the grief part, and when you're in the depths of grief, like you're not going to want to see people hear pregnancy announcements. Too painful. Exactly that what you're saying. But later on, it's like, you know, sitting in it for a long time. For me personally, just wasn't going to serve me.
Right. I agree. So as we close here, is there anything else that you'd like to make sure that we cover? Any last words that you'd like to say before we close out? It's been such a pleasure to talk to you today, but anything?
Thanks for inviting me. It means so much to me to share my story, my voice, especially as a South Asian Muslim woman. Sometimes our voices aren't always heard. So that's really important to me. So thank you so much. I just think, you know, if there was anything I'd want someone to take away from this podcast, it's that you can have a lovely, happy, fulfilling life without kids. But I think that definitely you have to be intentional about your happiness because of society's projections about not being a parent. And also, I think the next biggest takeaway is I've definitely seen a difference in people who've got help, you know, after their journeys come to an end. I feel like, you know, they've moved forward in a way that's different to those who haven't necessarily got help. It really, really helped me because you can sit with someone impartial, you know, sit with them in the ache and be able to explain and talk about your story. So if that was another thing I'd want people to take away is if you can, it doesn't have to be coaching or therapy. It can be even groups. There are so many groups out there now. Just so that you're around people that you can connect with that get it, that get your story. It might not be the same situation, but people will understand how you feel when you don't have children and whether it's by circumstance, fertility, something else. It's important to be around your peers and people who get it, I think, because it can feel a lot more lonely when you're just around everyone else who is having babies. So yeah, that's what I'd like people to take away.
I love that. And I love that you say sit with them in the ache. I love that. Thank you so much for your time today, Aisha. Like I said, it was a pleasure to speak with you. And I know that the listeners are going to feel the same way. I really appreciate your time today. And everybody, please let Aisha know that you enjoyed her episode. And like I said, I'm going to put her link and any other contact information in the show notes. And until next time, I'll see you guys in May. Bye.
Thanks for having me.